Na die treinongeluk tussen Henneman en Kroonstad word 2 plaasseuns van die distrik as helde bestempel. 'n Plaaslike kunstenaar en entrepreneur besluit om die seuns vir hulle wagmoed en heldedaad te vereer.
En dit is hier waar gewone mense ons nog inspireer en hoop gee, waar verhoudings ontwikkel, waar omgee en saamstaan van self kom, waar oplossings en uitkyk vir mekaar belangrik is. Senbes, saam breek ons nuwe grond.
Mokonli ever tumelang. Lekai. Leteng. Di kgweding tse fetang le tletse dikuranta, le tletse TV, wa bona motho ga sheba YouTube a type maina lona le teng. South Africa kaofela batho ba le tseba. E le kutliswa jwang ntweo?
Ke tla ha monate because ke thusitse batho training.
Mokoni wena?
Ke kutla monate wa thusitse batho training.
Ke utlwisisa hore lona la ba babedi le bagotsi. Ene segotse sa lona se qadile le na le dilemo tse 2. Mpolella ka segotse sa lona Mokoni. O mo tseba jwang Evert?
Mo tseba a bua Sesotho, ha ke kopana le.
O bo kopana le na kae? Stateng ke mona plaseng. Evert wena Mokoni o re bua Sesotho. O rutile ke mang ho bua Sesotho?
Bo metonto ntse ba nhodisa.
Bo metonto ba sebetsang ka tlung.
Le Leyland.
Ha ne le kopana he segotse sa lona se qadile jwang? Ne letsang mogo, ne le bua kang, ne letsa eng? Nkoqeleng ka mgo segotse se qadileng ka teng.
Then re babedi re ratelo kalama dipere and then ke na le dipere tse thao. And then ntse re di kalama ne le monate because re qadile ka poni. Nna re rata ditaba tseo le bolo ga e ratang.
And then le kena sekolo se se 1. Byanong ha le ya sekolong ha le hopolane?
Ga hopolane.
Le na le bagotsi ba bang sekolong? Mokoni bagotsi ba hao sekolong ba tseba mogotsi wa hao o mogolo ke mang? Wena Evert sekolong o na le mogotsi o mongwe moholo?
Mara se holo jalo ka Mokoni.
Nqoqela ka segotse sa hao le Mokoni se jwang?
Tse nna le Mokoni re na le relationship e nngwe. Ha khone o be go bela ha re lwana mehleng go tlo bapala hape. Ha ne motho tlo separate wa bona.
O rata eng ka Mokoni?
Ke rata ditaba tsa ntsa mbapadisa. O nketsa tse ke tshewa ka bula. And then re bapala monate.
Mokoni wena o ratang ka Evert?
Ke rata ha re bapale bolo ke a re bapale, ha re bapala Xbox ke a re bapala.
O rata bapala le ena. A re ka jeno le tswa sekolong. Ne? Le qeta o fitla hae la ja, ha le qeta o ja le etsa eng?
Re bapala.
La bapala. And then the homework
re di etsa bosiu.
Mara le di etsa bosiu Samu or yang. Nqoqeleng ke batla tsebo
le etsa ha bona nne ke etsa go.
And then ha le tla sekolong letsang la bapala eng le palama dipere letsa eng?
Re bapala bolo. Ra thunya.
Le thunya eng?
Motlanyana di thwetsana tsa ngata di tarantala.
Le thunya le rutulwa ke mang ho thunya Mokoni?
Ntate wa ka lena.
And then le thunya ka eng?
Ka sethunya.
Se se jwang? Sa di
Hasbambox.
And then ha ne ntse le gola le na le 6. Ne? Mokoni o la etsa ntho sa e rateng. O na entseng?
O blele sin kankan.
O bolele sen kankan. Mokoni and then wena ka etsang? Ka mo botsa re why ka o etsa halang ke nqoqela letsatsi leo ne le bapala kae le ntse letsang Mokoni?
Re ne bapala le tamo male re ntsha dinkankan.
And then ka o etsa la eng? Ke batla tsebo re le fitlhile yang gore Evert a o kwatele ho no etsa la eng?
Ke reile senkankan ka fitla alwana ka fitla re lwana ka fitla re thabelana.
So lona le thabelana after nako e kae? Ha le kwatelane?
Seng nako itelele 10 minutes 15 minutes.
10 minutes 15 minutes.
O kopola hour ntse ke utla badly. Ke utla hantle ka mona ntse re ke tsamaya mo. ke re ha de o yena ntse
O re hade e tjho reng?
Sorry.
Oh, so ha le qabane after 15 minutes o re hade and then le ya sharp le ba sharp. Mokone ke eng ntho o ka reng ever o rutile yona ne ke ntho e tla dula pelong ya hao bophelo ba hao kaofela?
Nrutile o thunya.
O rutile o thunya. Oh, o rata o thunya. O batla ba eng ha o gola?
Leso.
O batla ba le sole. So hobaneng o batla ba le sole?
Batho sebetsa fela.
Mara ha o sebetsa fela mose wa tsamaya mogotsing wa hao?
Ke tla kopana le ena mohleng ke tlang ha rona. Re kopana.
Le tla kopana toropong. Everton o batla ba eng ha o pilot? Why hobaneng o batla ba pilot? Because ha o le pilot o lo tsamaya mose ho Mokone le ka se bonane.
At least le tla sebetsa masoleng le yena ntse ke be pilot.
Oh, bona lena le plan. O ko re le bohlale sekgotseng se sa lona ne. Okay, nqoqeleng he ha le plasing le robala sam ka di weekend.
Ga robala sam.
Kae?
Ha bona kopela ha bona.
A re ke Moqebelo la tsoha le tsoha le tse eng?
Ra kerekeng.
Ka Moqebelo, that's Saturday.
Ke a tseba.
Yeah, la tsoha la kerekeng. Oh, okay, le kereke feng?
Seventh Adventist.
Oh, okay. So la kerekeng and then al khutla kerekeng le tsang.
Ga bapala re kalama dipere tsa mo tshwara ditlhapi.
Le tshwara ditlhapi. And then ditlhapi ha le di tshwara la di ja o kopa o pala di rekisa.
Ga di khutlisetsa.
La di tshwara and then
ga di khutlisetsa
metsi.
Ha le na le dijara tse 9 wa hopola Mokone o la le mala. And then Mokone ha na le metsi ntho e la utlwisa o la utlwa jwang o tseba hore mogotsi wa hao o sepetlele o le metsi.
Ke dula bohloko.
Ha na ntsa le sepetlele o no ikutla jwang?
A bohloko ntse ke batla mo checkela mehlang.
Mokone ha o shebile wona le Ever se khotse sa lona se ya kae?
Re tlo ba bokgotsi fitalla mo re tla tlwellana.
Mo le oh, so wena o plana go tlwela ntho Ever. O ka se mo tlwela.
Re tla be mo khotse pele ga batlama. Ntse
pele le tsang
ga shwa.
Oh, until le tle le shwa. Mang ha ona motho tla tsang.
Motho ba tlo shwa.
O ba tlo shwa. Ever to no bapala rugby. Mokone wena o bapala eng sekolong?
Re bapala bolo.
Jaanong ha Ever a ilo bapala rugby or ha Mokone a ilo bapala bolo la shebana o kopa o la shebana.
Ena wan shebela mara nna ke kena timing ya bona nna.
So le ba khotsi ba hae ba sekolong ba o tlwaetse
le bona ba mokgotsi ba ka.
A ona ba khotsi toropong
di teng.
Mara o rato bapala le bomang thata?
Batho ba plasing.
Batho ba plasing wa hobaneng?
Ba tla etsa tshotsene tsa ngata. Batho ba toropong ha ba di tshaba kaofela ditaba tseo. Ha ba no tola le tamu, ha ba no kwela dipere ba di tshaba.
And then ha le gola le nahana le tlo dula kae? Le batlo dula plasing o le batlo dula toropong?
Plasing.
O batlo dula kae Mokone?
Plasing.
So yanong bophelo ba lena bo plasing hantle ha le shebile lona. All right, no ke a lutla. And then le khono phe le khono braya. Ke eng ntho e le ratang ho yija le mmogo? Khaka
o kapela kgoho kapela
dinku. And then ha le tshwere bo tarantala kwana masimong le etsang ka yona?
Ga isla.
And then la yija
ya ga braya ga yija.
And then le khono ganna di tracker. And then le di ganna le rutile ke mang ko o ganna di tracker Mokone?
Ke ntate wa rona.
And then le di ganna ha o etsala
re ya masimong go lokuta bojwang.
And then hana le ntse le gola le na le bo 6 le kile la etsa something gore maybe mme wa Mokone a le shape o mme wa Everty a le shape le entseng o mong le mong a njotse story sa hae?
Ntse re monyane mona ntse re bapetse ana le motho a le wa le khua dutse mo ga ora ba re nna le Mokone re tsutse phone ya hae mare ha ga utswa intleke we lahlile we mehlang ngwe ba ithotse fatshe re shapu.
Le shapu ke mang?
Ke ntate wa ka le ntate wa hae.
And then mokone wena o hopolang le sikle la kena mathateng for eng ha le banyane.
Re lo utswa fela dikuku. Ka go fihla ba kgaoletsa ka tlung. Ba re shapa.
Ba le shapa. Why le utsa dikuku le sa di kgopele?
Ni la katsa.
Ne le sa di kope keng?
No se tlogile.
Ona tlo le tima.
Why? O swai, o stingy.
Ke eng engwe hape e le etsang e le tsebang hore a se ntho le tlamele le etseng?
Ga lwana.
Le lwanelang. Kante nna ke nahana hore le di mata mos le di le di mata.
Re lwana le batho ba le ga ba qabana rona ba go wa ka yena ke mo thusa.
Bo mo thusa ho shapa batho. Mmokone le wena ba mo thusa batho ha ba mo tshwenya. So yanong lona se gotse sa lona se so. Ha le batle batho ba bang ba le arogana.
A re dumela. Ga ba shapa rona.
La ba shapa ha le ba tshabi.
Ha ke ba tshabi.
Ketso ya lona e le entseng ke ketso e thabisang haholo. Ene ke batla le tsebe hore le he le ka gola le dula le ntse le bagotsi le ratana the way le ratanang ka teng mokone. Ene le skebela la hlana. Hobane se gotse se tshwanang le sa lona ha se gotse se fumanehang. Re leboga ketso e le entseng ho thusa bana ho bantsha ka training. Ene re leboga ho bona le hore la ratana haholo. Bokamoso ba lona ke bokamoso bo botle. Ene ke le lakaletsa mahlatsi. Ene le tshware sekolong le keneng sekolo le passeng dibukeng. Ke a leboga.
Ha ke hole ke batla ho sebetsa ka dipoone.
Ha ke hola ke batla ho sebetsa ka dikgomo.
Ka dikgomo?
'n Langtermynvisie om later die vrugte te pluk. Senwes, saam breek ons nuwe grond.
Onthou jy die vetkoek en mins by die bazaar, die vis en chips in koerantpapier en die naweekbederf saam met oupa by die plaaslike koöperasie? Deur die jare het soveel verander, tog het soveel dieselfde gebly. Hinterland is die bymekaar kom plek vir ons boere. Elke stadsjapie met 'n tuin, 'n huis, 'n eenstop inkopiebestemming. Hier ontmoet ervaring en innovering.
Good morning and welcome to the show. We're going to discuss an interesting subject this morning. Some of you might participate in the subject already, which is family farming, and the emphasis that the United Nations is putting on this for the coming period of time. But before I ask John Purchase to introduce the subject, I'm going to ask each of our panel members just to say briefly who they are and what they're doing. Dan?
Hello, I'm Dan Creek. I'm the president of Agri SA, and I'm also a cattle farmer in the Free State.
Good morning, I'm John Purchase. I'm the Chief Executive of the Agricultural Business Chamber, known as AgBiz in South Africa.
My name is Pitso Sekgoto. I'm a farmer in Free State, and I'm also a agricultural activist under FASA.
Ek is Johan Willemse, afgetrede professor by Vrystaat Universiteit in Landbouekonomie en werk my hele lewe lank met kommersiële boere en agribesighede.
I'm Malcolm Ferguson. I'm a former South African diplomat, and I represent a Mexican maize producer, the largest export maize producer in Mexico, in Africa and the Middle East.
John, I would like to ask you to introduce for us the subject. You've made a study of it, and I think it's something new for us to contemplate in terms of the intended meaning of what this program of the United Nations means.
Yes, thank you, Roelf. Just reading up a bit about what the decision by the United Nations was last year in terms of making 2018 to 2027 the decade of family farming, that focus on it, and why they've taken this decision. They delegated that decision to the FAO, the Food and Agricultural Organization, which is a subsidiary basically of United Nations, as well as to IFAD, the International Fund for Agricultural Development. So we must know that there are over 500 million family farms in the world, which is very significant. And these family farms range from smallholder to medium scale farm sizes. So it's across pastoralists, it's smallholder, 1 hectare, 2 hectare plots, right up to bigger farms. It's very diversified agricultural systems, but I also just want to quote some statistics because this gives us context in terms of what we're going to discuss today. So more than 90% of the 570 million farms worldwide are managed by an individual or a family that rely primarily on family labor. Those family farms produce more than 80% of the world's food in terms of value. The vast majority of the world's farms are small or very small. Small farms smaller than 2 hectares account for 84% of all farms and control only 12% of agricultural land. So you can see that the focus is more on the smallholder situation, especially into Africa, where 90% of Africa's food is produced by smallholders, and then in Asia especially, and certain degree South America, etc. So one must just also understand how they couch this. And the whole idea is to have policies, is for governments to adopt policies to create an enabling environment for smallholders and medium-scale farmers to survive in an era in which industrialized farming is becoming more prevalent across the world. You see a lot of that in Netherlands, for especially United States, even in other countries, even in South Africa to a certain degree. So just to give you that context of what their meaning was in terms of the decade of of family farming.
And the emphasis, of course, is also on economic growth and labor production, or the labor opportunities.
Absolutely, around sustainability issues, and then also using technology to produce more with less, because it's also got to be competitive in a global environment, and this is often where family farms become under pressure from your industrialized type of farming situation. So you'll need support for family farms, but we must also drive efficiency, productivity in this whole process. Otherwise, family farms are going to battle to compete with large-scale industrialized farming.
Malcolm, you've had some international experience during your term as ambassador to Mexico.
Yes.
And also others. How does that compare with what you know the South African situation is?
Well, the interesting thing is that in South Africa we think that most farmers in fact are family farmers, because father and son and grandfather are all involved in farming. But in fact, I think from the UN point of view, they are perceived mostly as commercial farmers. Mexico underwent a very violent process of land reform in the 1920s and 1930s. They speak about it in Mexico as part of their revolution, but in fact it was a civil war. And there was a lot of land confiscated from very big Catholic landowners, and it was distributed among the peasants. And most of the small farm sizes are generally between 5 and 20 to 25 hectares. And the company that I represent, in fact, contracts around 5,500 smallholder family farmers to produce for them. The total amount of land under cultivation as part of our company's project is around 93,000 with the smallholder farmers, and then the 3 families that are the directors and owners of the company farm around 11,000 hectares themselves. So 105,000 hectares of land under cultivation, producing just over 1 million tons of white maize annually.
And here in South Africa, you are working closely with some sectors of the family farming community.
Yes. What we call the family farmers, commercial farmers. Yes, I do.
Bitsu, you are a family farmer yourself, if I'm right.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think it's actually very tough in our situation, where you need to start on your own, have this passion. Otherwise, if you don't have passion and you don't have self-drive, you're not going to achieve. Because if you check the situation of our country now and also the world, competition and compliance, all those things actually gives a lot of blockage for smallholder farmers to come into the situation. But the advantage is that we have is for us to come and make relationships with those who are so-called commercial farmers, to start developing an interest of identifying those who are actually able to participate in this operation. That would be the crux of how are we going to achieve the way forward. Unfortunately, our government doesn't come closer to identifying what needs to be done in order to attract a lot of smallholder farmers to come into the world. That's the most critical part. If you check China, you check India, you check Brazil, actually the government was the one who was actually pushing for environment to be conducive for smallholder farmers to come into the picture, gardening and all those things. I think we need to change our perceptions of saying farming it's meant for those who are big. In fact, farming is meant for those that should come from the bottom and go up, take the next stage as we're going. I think that's where the government is missing the point.
What is lacking specifically in terms of government understanding?
I think political power and political drive to say this is what we want to achieve by identifying this playing field to accept easy entrance to those who are prepared to work on the land, not for everybody, but for those who are prepared to work on the land, had to get that opportunity, an environment that would accept them to go forward. That's I think our main challenge in this country, and also in Africa, to say the least.
Johan, you have educated a lot of farmers, existing farmers, and you are giving advice, I'm quite sure still, to a lot of farmers. What would be your point of view on this?
I think the reality is that we have a very liberalized marketing system in South Africa. We've liberalized our whole domestic marketing system, but we also liberalized trade. We're one of the 3 countries with the lowest import duties in the world in terms of importing of agricultural products. Also one of the lowest government support subsidies to our producers. So the reality is, doesn't matter the scale of your farming, but if you're a family farm, commercial farm, smaller emerging commercial farmer, you need to compete with very efficient international producers. And for that you need capital, you need technology, you need research, you need innovation. And I think that makes it very, very difficult, where Pitso is referring to, if you're a smaller upcoming farmer, to compete with that import. Let's take an example of broiler. 40% of our domestic consumption of broilers are imported. I would dare to say there's very little independent, smaller broiler producers left. It's all commercial companies. Astral, which is one of the dominant ones, just made last week their comment in their annual financial results. They're going to invest 1.3 billion rand to reduce costs to be able to compete with imports. And that's a challenge. It doesn't matter the size, but it's more so for a family farm which don't have sufficient capital, which need technology, and they're still in the process of building up capital. And then a second really big issue is to make sure that that continues into the next new generation, because we have a very harsh capital tax system. And a tax, if you inherit your farm, you pay a lot of taxes, which there's a lot of issues involved with this.
I would like to come back to that, but after I'll ask Dan to come in and tell us about Agri-SA in terms of the contribution that this collective of South African farmers is making at the moment. We heard some of it yesterday during one of the other discussions.
Yeah, so Roelf, we have to talk a little bit of politics here now, because now we're getting to the politics of family farming, and we've got to acknowledge that over a century, because that's why Pitso is sitting here, over a century we had one sector of family farms and commercial farmers being allowed to develop to where they are now. And you have another sector of commercial farmers, small-scale farmers, and the first group is mainly white, and the second group, small-scale farmers and subsistence farmers, because of our history and our past and political decisions that we made, those are mainly black. And that dualism is what we are confronted with now. So within this mix of family farms and by the way, the concept of big white commercial farmers does not exist. We are mainly small and medium-scale farmers in this country with a very small percentage of big farmers or mega farmers. So to be competitive in an environment which Johan has just described to you is extremely difficult, and to do land reform and to have black commercial farmers evolve in this environment is also very tough. So economically, people would say that small-scale farmers are not viable. I don't think we have that luxury in this country. Politically, it's a political imperative that small-scale farmers and black farmers do get land, do evolve, do become commercial farmers, do become a part of the value chain. That's why we have the National Development Plan. The plan there is exactly that, to get small-scale farmers off the ground, to increase their production. If they increase their production, they can employ people, etc., etc. So I'm going to jump right into it. We are going the wrong way to have an enabling environment to do this. We are going the wrong way with property rights. We are watering down property rights. I think part of the topic was focusing on the individual. The way that we focus on the individual in South Africa is via the Constitution and our civil liberties that are enshrined in the Bill of Rights. And that we need to protect. We're going the wrong way with property rights. We should go exactly the opposite way and afford farmers' property rights. And then you open up all the finance possibilities that will follow that. So I would like to jump in right there and say, if we have made that choice politically, which is the correct one, then we need to go property rights. We need to secure that. We need to get the finance in order to get them off the ground, and then we need a level of trust. We simply do not have, with all respect to government, we do not have the civil service in government, in the departments, to pull this off. So I see a far greater role for the private sector, for agribusinesses, for Agri-SA, for the commodities, in partnerships. I think Pitso has touched on it, in partnerships, and that's the way it's going to work. I don't see it working any other way, but we need to establish that level of trust. We don't have that at the moment.
So what you're saying is title is key for also the small farmer.
Yes.
If I may jump in, the thing is you need capital.
Yes.
And if you don't have security of tenure on a piece of land that you don't have access to capital. Without access to capital, you don't have access to technology to be able to compete. So that's a fundamental basic policy that we need to agree on.
Some of the commodity organizations are doing a lot to help small farmers. What you are saying is that it's not enough yet. Pitso?
I think it's not enough. We need to come together as the industry now, black and white, to start addressing the issues that are facing us. And if we are not going to do that, we are opening up for whoever that sees opportunity to play around with the situation. And I think it's clear now that the message that we need to do as the industry, we need to come up with a plan of helping the government with this land reform problem. Commercial farmers and mega farmers, we need to partner ourselves. I'll stress that, because without that, I can assure you, even the government is not going to get enough money to buy the land. Let's be honest. So we need to have that money where it's sitting somewhere with the industry that should see how we can accelerate that money in the form of developing youth, because it's important. Our chances of succeeding, it's over. I'm 60 years old. I can't see myself really being rich. So I need to make an environment to be much more conducive for the future to come into this industry, so that it shouldn't be seen as one-side industry of whites. Because at the moment, perception is like this industry is for white only. And you blacks are not going to be able to come in because the level of entrance is just too high. And the government is not playing the ball. So we need to come up with a plan of saying, oh, and actually of going to the government and tell them, to say, but this is not right. China has done it, India has done it, Brazil has done it. Why are we not taking initiatives from making sure that the government becomes part of this, not always coming up with the plans of this is how we are going to do it. You know, it's like every time they come with a plan, but the plan doesn't suit by themselves, even NDP now, amongst themselves, they don't agree. So it's a challenge that we are facing. We as the industry, unite and come with a plan to go and put it to the government. So this is how we want this to happen. Land reform has failed. And what are we doing? We are just talking. It has failed. What are we doing now to actually make sure that it's going to work before even this expropriation or whatever comes? But we are faced with the land reform issues that we need to address.
But I think, Peter, you would agree, apart from the land ownership and land issue, access to land is access to the markets. That's a big issue, and this is what Mexico and those guys are doing right, is to pull in the small-scale farmers or smaller emerging farmers, family farms, into the supply chain. And we're struggling with that. And part of that scenario is, again, a very free market, liberalized scenario. And the supermarkets, these 4 supermarket groups dominating the environment. And if you go, let's take milk as an example, where you come from the Eastern Free State. The big milk buyers are not interested to collect 50 liters or 100 liters or 200 liters from 10 different cows. They would prefer to go to one farmer, collect 30,000 liters because of economies of scale. So the other challenge is for us to get market access and to look at a Mexico example of how to pull it in, because if you don't have market access and proper prices, you're also in a bad spot. So our policy have to look at that as well.
John, I was going to ask, how do you think can the UN plan, this project that they have put forward, how can that inform us in South Africa in going to the next phase?
I mentioned it in the beginning. It's for countries then to adopt policies to strengthen family farms, and especially the marginalized smaller holders, so that we don't upset communities, etc. And I think what we see in South Africa, and Johan actually described it very well, we need that liberalized agricultural system because it drives firstly efficiency. And efficiency makes us food secure. Our food is of the most affordable in the world because we are net exporter of food. In other words, we're basically pricing our food at export parity, not import parity. And you can go and travel all around the world and you'll see our food is of the cheapest in the world, if not the cheapest. Value for money, the best, in my opinion, in the world. And that's because of the system. But now, because you have that, scale becomes very important. Now, and then it marginalizes new entrants and emerging farmers and smallholders. Then you need a special backup system, a policy system that brings that in. And that comes into finance that Dan spoke about, your blended finance models that we're developing now with both the Department of Agriculture and ourselves with Land Bank and the Jobs Fund. So there's a whole new process coming around finance. But finance is only one. It's also other support structures that you have to bring in, aggregation models that Johan spoke about, the market access models. My opinion is our biggest problem in South Africa now is what we call demand-side management in terms of agricultural products. Because we're exporting approximately 70% of the, not of our production, of the commodities that we produce in South Africa are now export-driven. Our nuts, our fruits, our wool, our beef, everything. So what you then need is to work with government to make sure that we can access the markets in Europe, the Middle East, the Far East, Africa, which is now our biggest export destination, but those things don't fall into your lap. You're competing with other countries there. So, and if we don't access and create greater market access for the new entrants to participate, you're just going to, your pie is just going to decrease. So to really grow the pie and to make it inclusive growth, you need the demand side management far better than what we've been doing now, and in those aggregation models and the support into those smallholders and emerging farmers. And I think that's, as I understand it, that's what the UN wants, to come back to your question, is bring in systems and policies that support also them to participate in this in these value chains. We've actually got a damn good system to do that. We must just now roll out proper policy with proper support from government. And I think there I agree with Pizza too. I think government hasn't worked closely enough or properly enough with private sector to enable us to get to that position. I think there's a better understanding now, there's an opportunity, and perhaps now is really the opportunity to take that, to take hold of that opportunity and to move forward.
Malcolm, in South Africa we don't really have experience about community farming or successful experiences.
No.
What is the case in other parts of the world?
Well, you know, I mean, I can say there are good examples in Latin America. Latin America is a very good place to learn both what's bad and what's good. And you can learn by seeing what's bad. It's something to avoid. I think the model that I know most about is the Mexican model, and particularly that practiced by our company. And essentially what it is one that is really a cradle-to-grave process. It starts every single requirement as an agricultural input. It's something that we supply to the farmers who we contract with. And what we do is we contract at the beginning of the season, not at the end of the season, so farmers know what price they're going to get per ton. We then hedge that on the Chicago Board of Exchange in futures trading. And essentially what we then do is we provide a financial package that covers all of the inputs. And then against that we then keep account for every one of the 5,500 families that do this farming. There are some challenges. I mean, we provide mechanization, we provide seed, we provide insurance, the finance we provide water. Really, I mean, you can look through the whole farming value chain up to the point of where we actually purchase from the farmers and pay them back against their account, whatever the difference is between what we financed and what the crop fetches at harvest time. We do the aggregation, we take it into our silos, we have silage more than 1 million tons, we take it into our silos and it's all exported. And essentially the consequence of that is that the model ensures that all of these 5,500 small farmers know from the beginning of the season exactly what they're going to be earning. At the end of the season, they know what their costs are. We provide extension services to ensure, and this is very important, what the quality is maintained. And something like the Stockveld system that we have here in South Africa, where there's somebody who's limping, who's not doing well, because it's communal, the community steps in and they help him or they help her. So the process is really one of community support, and it works very well. And it's a very successful model. And then we're farming side by side with them on a very large scale, a macro scale. We're farming 11,000 hectares of maize. And in general, even the small scale farmers are getting yields on non-GMO, because in Mexico there's only production of non-GMO maize. We're getting yields of around 11 tons per hectare. So the yields are good, and it is all irrigated farming. So that's one of the reasons why the irrigation is good. And the irrigation, of course, is taking place absolutely timelessly. 3 times, it's all flood by way of furrows. It's all flooded fields. So it's a very scientific and well worked out process, with the aggregation all managed for everybody, and it works collectively extremely well.
I'm sure all of us would like to see the industry succeed in South Africa. I'm talking about the agricultural industry, succeed and grow. And as we said yesterday, to contribute more to the GDP of the country. What about processing as an additional contributor to the industry? And just to bring that in context, I read this week that the Franchising Association claims that the franchising industry in South Africa produce about 13% of GDP, which is massive. I didn't expect it that high. But surely, if we talk about that, there's also a potential contribution from the side of agriculture.
Can I get into that one, Roelf? I think it's very important to understand that for agricultural production to grow, you need the pull factor in the chain. And our 2 biggest pull factors are exports, and the second one is agro-processing. But agro-processing also goes into exports eventually. We've done quite an analysis of the agro-processing sector in South Africa. Now, manufacturing in South Africa, of which agro-processing is part, has declined from 25% of GDP to about 13% now. And that's the deindustrialization of South Africa. The good news, though, is that agro-processing has not declined. It's the one sector, subsector in manufacturing that has not declined. It's still growing. And it now contributes 25% of total manufacturing in South Africa, which is actually an indictment on the other part of manufacturing. I'm talking metal industry and so on. So agro-processing is still doing pretty well. But we're seeing, if we look at the numbers, and we work closely with National Treasury on this through the CEO initiative, is that it's actually the exports that are driving the biggest demand at the moment, because we've become competitive in the beef industry, for example, and other industries. But you must work these in combination, both agro-processing and our ability to be competitive in the international markets, to create that pull, because then we can establish farmers and we can support them to be productive in that situation. And this is where we're not there. We're failing it a bit, because we can make this whole value chain competitive globally. We're actually already there to a large degree. But through the right support systems, the right policies, and I think that's actually what the UN is saying. Bring in the right support systems, the right models, and you can actually grow those communities too. In South Africa, we can't just have big, massive mega farmers. It's not going to be sustainable from a socio-political point of view. We have communal areas where we have smallholders. You can't wish it away. So we've got to use the resources that we have and the people that we have, get them well-trained, skilled, get the right technology, make them productive, and then have the systems, aggregation systems, etc., to take part in these value chains that are competitive. We're actually quite a way down the road. We got the building blocks to do that.
Pizza and then Dan?
Yeah, I think that's where I have a problem with the market. because processing is actually another venue for growing the market. Now, we are not using that. Now, you see ourselves, we are actually putting ourselves in shells where we can't open up. Even the very same commercial farmers are playing the game. I'll take your issue of milk. We need to come up with a plan. Why can't you tell these guys to go somewhere if they can't take, because we are just price takers all the time. Somewhere along the line, we need to stand up and say, this is what we need to do as an industry of that particular commodity. This is how we can go, and this is how far you can go. Somebody is going to come out and say, I'll pay for this. But because we are price takers, we are in that system of just taking whatever the market is giving us. And lastly, we are in this so-called China, India, BRICS. What are we learning out of those people? I've gone through so many issues about their market. They are actually the biggest in agriculture in the world. What are we learning from them? What are we taking that would actually make us to be partner in those fields? I feel that the government is not playing what it's supposed to do. Today, lastly, it's the Department Vote of Agriculture. Look where we are sitting. They should be sitting here with us and planning that with us here. So that, because that money that they are going to develop, it's actually developing for us, but we are not part of it. So let's be honest to ourselves. Today, the Department of Agriculture is putting their budget, but we are not part of it.
Okay.
Thank you.
I will come back to that one, but
let's not be despondent now. Everything that John has spoken about, we've got a world-class agricultural sector, but there's a dualism, and I've spoken about that. We export more than we import. So the problem with that is everything that John has spoken about, the whole value chain, is built on the family farms of commercial farmers, small and medium size. The ones that are despondent and the ones that are uncertain. And that's where I want to get back to policy. This program of the UN is fine. We will have to sort out our own problems here in South Africa, and we will have to find one another on that. Ever since 1994, we've been competing with other priorities, health, education, etc. The very budget that Pizzo has been speaking about is probably going to be cut. I hope not. Our budget for land reform is being cut ever since 2008 and 2009. So there we have limited resources. How do we spend it? Who do we trust to spend it? It does not help that the whole value chain that John has spoken about and the family farms that are producing for that value chain are uncertain at this stage. So the first one for me, and I want to get back to it, it's crucial, our policies regarding our property rights. That is crucial. You cannot get, the levels of uncertainty is simply too high. You don't want farmers, South African farmers, talking about Australia and everything else. Personally, I don't want assurances from the Australian government. I want assurances from my own government. Farmers are still mainly positive, but they are uncertain, and that is not healthy. So the first set of policies is property rights. The second set of policies is finance, because that just follows that. The third set of policies is post-settlement support, and how do we take care of our small-scale farmers? Who do we trust to do it? Who do we trust to spend the money? Who do we trust to do that efficiently? And then I just want to quickly refer to our transformation report. You touched on the subject. What do commodities do? Let's just take one example, like the wool farmers in the Eastern Cape, who are communal farmers. That they don't even, they own the land, all of them together. And ever since the National Wool Growers Association got involved, I think in 1994, they produced 1.5 million rands of wool. Now they produce in excess of 300 million rands of wool. They produce 13% of the national clip. How did they get there? They got there by the involvement of the private sector, a RAM project introduction, and I'm being very practical now, introducing genes, a gene pool, a RAM project, which, by the way, we are now struggling to get going for the next couple of years. You can't believe that with that kind of impact you are struggling to keep programs going. Shearing sheds, infrastructure, marketing, how to class their wool, how to market their wool. And now they're selling 350 million rands worth of wool, communal farmers. And if you look at the socio-economic impact and the studies that's been done on what the effect of that is, poor people are now sending their kids to university. And that's the type of thing. So let's not get despondent. We are doing it. We're just not doing it fast enough. We're not trusting one another enough. And we actually have a good track record of doing these things. We've just got to accelerate it, do it better with the limited resources to our disposal.
What I hear you all saying is that the Department of Agriculture actually has to play a more direct role. You are?
I just want to add another dimension. We're talking about family farming. I found a lot of conflict in families that's farming. And even if you're a small farmer and busy going up the commercial chain, you need to build capital over 2 and 3 generations. But the conflict in that relationships are unbelievable. And we don't use, or we don't have actually the
You mean within the family?
Within the family. It's unbelievable. We have a financial plan, but we don't have a family plan. Who will be responsible for what? What is the task of every family member? Remember, how will it pass on from the one generation to the next? In other countries, Canada, etc., that's a huge thing, and I believe we will be successful with our land reform. But then, Peter, I'm sure your children are farming with you, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, she's sitting there.
Okay. Have you spoke to her about how she will take over?
Yes, she has already taken over.
He's an example. I know of a lot of commercial family farms.
She has already taken over.
Yeah, but it's not a plan.
Very
and
important.
that's another thing, Roelf, if we want to focus on family farms, that's the thing that we miss a lot of times, is that relationship. How you manage that succession planning, the business plan to facilitate that.
That's very important.
When we shift the focus to the audience, I would like to ask that question, because I think there are some family farmers in the audience who can reflect from their experience about this, and also how they can help others to gain that experience. I think that is key. But John, you wanted to come in on the question of the role of the Department of Agriculture.
I think the role of the Department of Agriculture is very important, but I think what we lack in South Africa is it can't just be the Department of Agriculture, because agriculture and the value chain cuts across so many departments. Water and sanitation, DTI, labour, and you can mention them, land reform,
rural development.
And there's no cohesive or coherent plan that goes across all that. You were privy, well, you were part of the discussion we had the other day, just on land reform, how cross-cutting that is, and that should perhaps be elevated to a presidential type of, or in the presidency, because we don't have a real champion within the Department of Agriculture to really cross-cut across all these issues. Perhaps we need a farm bill, like in the US, which cuts across all departments and dedicates you agriculture and everything that goes with agriculture, land, water, etc., to a much higher level. And that then overrides other legislation. So then you're putting the right emphasis and you have a coherent, cohesive plan. Perhaps we should be thinking of something like that, because the way government is structured now, agriculture is on the losing end because of the government works in silos. And if we don't get that right, we're not going to get the right support structures, because we need the support mechanisms through policy and legislation and programs to really bring everybody into this value chain properly.
But the question government will ask is the private sector well organized enough?
I would say yes, certainly.
Yes, we are.
In terms of collaboration between
yeah,
agribusiness, agri-SA and other sectors?
Yes, I think our institutional structures are very strong. From time to time, obviously in the value chain you're going to have differences, because it's a competitive environment. We must understand that, but I think the capacities that we have within the commodity organizations, the provincial unions, within the agribusiness sector, and within the agribusiness sector there are different organizations, and the linkages that we have into certain departments puts us at a 10 times better position than what government has to roll this out.
Very important in that regard is all of this also accessible for emerging new farmers?
Can I answer that? You know, we have just gone through Pakisa. How many of you know Pakisa? The government has spent close to about 70 million. Push us in the next 5-7 weeks, sitting there, coming up with a plan. Where's that plan? How far is that plan now? After the whole thing has been done, the government is putting back all our energy back to the champions calls officials who must drive the same Pakisa. It has fallen flat. Now I'm saying we have done all what we are supposed to do as structures. I agree with John here when he says the structures, everybody is ready to take this forward. We only need to have our government to participate and move forward. That's what we need.
Okay, I think it's about time that we move to the...
Can I just complicate it one?
Yes, please.
Yeah. There's two sets of policies which I think we're not talking. Implementation is absolutely key. We need to talk about. We have all the plans. We need to implement. Our farmers are not safe. Our farmers, all of us, black and white, and our farm workers are not safe on our farms. That is something that is abnormal to our society. You don't get it in other, well, there's crime in other countries, but not like we have it here. So the implementation of the rural safety strategies, that is absolutely key. You cannot have family farms and people want to be, invest and be happy and farm if they don't feel safe. That's key for me. Second one is disaster management. Disaster management policies is lacking, and I've spoken to John a lot about this. You are on your own. You are basically on your own. And as small-scale and medium-scale farmers and emerging farmers going through droughts, you are on your own to a very large extent. So for me, we have to, there's no safety net, or we need to have multi-peril insurance, something in that sense, to just get a safety net so that people don't fall through the cracks. We cannot lose commercial farmers in one space and then say we're going to have emerging farmers and land reform and establish them in the very same space and expect them to flourish. So I would just like to add those two to complement.
Let me just ask the question. Is Agri-SA, has it got a plan specifically with regard to farm security?
Yes, we do.
I follow your statements on a regular basis, and I found them very constructive, by the way. But the question is, what can we do to change the security problem?
Well, first of all, we need our relationships with the SA, with SAPS, which is at a good level. We need the implementation of the rural safety strategy. It's not that we don't have a good policy or a good strategy, it's the implementation. We've got to acknowledge that if we want to deal with the problem, we've got to first of all acknowledge the true reflection of the stats, and that is that white farmers, black farmers, and farm workers are being murdered. So if we don't acknowledge that, and if we play around with the stats in all sorts of ways to suit our arguments, we will not succeed. So it's got to be a collaborative effort. It's got to go right down to local level. Your own responsibility on your farm, your responsibility as a community, your responsibility to work with the police, their own responsibility in implementing their own strategies. And I can see no other way how we're going to deal with this if we do not work together, if we do not acknowledge the real stats and the real facts, that it's everybody who's vulnerable, and maybe we need to put it very, very bluntly, every racial group in this country is burying their own dead. And until the time that we get to a point where we can see one another and experience the pain across the racial divide, we will not solve this problem. So in that, for me, lies the answer. So yes, we are heavily involved in that. Rural safety is absolutely key for Agri-SA.
Have you met with the new Minister of Police yet?
We have met with the support structures. We are waiting for the new rural safety strategy for the first time as a budget, and it has implementation timeframes. And that has only been launched like in a week or so ago. or a month ago. So I think that would be the next level of how do we implement, what are the budgets, what are the time frames? Because we do the audits of the rural safety strategy, we know where the problems are, it's at local level, local police, resources, etc., etc. And we need a collaborative effort to solve that. It's not going to help being at each other's throats the whole time on this one.
Pichu.
I think I'll differ a little bit with the issue of security. Let's not identify farmers, whether black or white. Let's deal with the issues of poverty in this country. And I think we need to seriously think about this issue of poverty. It creates a lot of criminals. If somebody see you driving whatever, is hungry, naturally is going to kill you. And I'm just saying, we need to come up with a plan that would reduce the issue of poverty first, and also make sure that holistically, inclusively, we address these issues of this country's problems, race, whatever. But if we really go and concentrate to one and say farmers, whatever, yes, in the townships, you'll be shocked if we have to get the statistics.
Yes.
We don't get them because they are just like there.
Yeah.
It's things that we work on. But because in the rural areas, yes, there's a farm there sitting alone, yes, it's obvious, they're going to attack it. But I think we need to come up with a plan that inclusively have to look into all what you're doing about. Bring all the department, as you said, John, to coordinate all. It's not about police only. It's about rural, it's about settlements. All those things need to come into a picture where we have one body that would oversee this for the next 10, 15 years to come. Because we don't have a plan up to today. How are we going to reduce the crime in this country?
But Roelf, there are a lot of poor people in this country who are decent and don't kill people and don't steal as well. So, but the point that Pichu is making, it's a complex crime, and the whole, it's rather complex. It's not a simple thing. And I would agree. Yes, obviously we have to go there. But South Africans, for the most of us, 99% of us are decent people. We don't go around killing one another and stealing. And I always believe that South Africans are decent people. And
well, I think the general statement that one can make is that we just have a level of violent crime in this country that is totally unacceptable. Across the spectrum, all communities, wherever you live. Let's go to the audience. I think the microphones are available. Shall we take 3 at a time? Let's go to the left first. Is there anybody? Let me see 2 more hands, if there are. Nobody? Okay, you go ahead.
Hi, my name is Estelle from Pretoria FM. I would just like to know, how can family farm businesses get involved in processing? And if I may ask another question, can a family farm business be successful in exporting?
Thank you. You can decide on who will respond. Some more questions to the left, to the right. Anybody? Not only questions, but also responses or comments. Please.
Hello, my name is Brent Parrott. I'm a farmer in the Delmas area. I think my question is pretty broad-based, but I'd like to know why are we fixating as a country on creating farmers? Why aren't we creating careers in agriculture? Everyone's looking to give people land for people to farm on, whether it be small holdings or or communal farms. I think we're setting people up for failure. Grain farming, on the one hand, the gentleman mentioned in Mexico, they're very successful, yes, because they've got water. And grain farming, as we know, is it's an easy commodity if you've got water to farm with. What about the rest of agriculture? What about the rest of the agricultural business or industry? It's not quite that easy to create these farmers. So I put it to you, and I put it to government, let's create farms. We know economy of scale works, and we need economy of scale. We cannot do without it. We see it in our own businesses every single day. If you don't have it, you're on a one-way ticket, and you won't be farming for too much longer. So we really need to, we need to stop thinking about creating farmers and setting these small-scale farmers up, setting them up for failure, where we can actually create key careers within agriculture. I don't want tractor drivers anymore who don't know how to read and write. I want a degreed person in my tractor. I want him to be able to multifunction and multitask. That's what I need. There's no way where I can go and get that. I have to do it myself. If we can create these centers, let's call them centers or farms of excellence, and we can create these people for the future, I think we're going somewhere, not setting people up for failure. Thank you.
Thank you. There's another question in front here.
Hello, Marika Rich from FarmBiz magazine. I just want to get a clear definition of family farming in this context, because some of the largest operations in South Africa are families who farm together, but from what I take here, family farming refers more to size and other things like that. So if someone can just give us a clear definition.
Okay, the first question was about family farming.
Processing.
Processing.
Yeah, it's absolutely possible. I know a lot of farmers that do processing on a farm, very successful. The challenge is to get it to market, because you compete with the supermarkets and you need to create a specific brand and position your brand. I'm a small-scale farmer. We try to sell peaches on the fresh produce market in Bloemfontein. I don't know if you've been there. Yeah. It's a shame.
It's a shame.
It's a shame. I've seen ZZ2 creating a private market. So the challenge is to get it to market, to get small farmer markets, like in other countries where entrepreneurs in the farming sector can go and sell their products. And we struggle with that concept as well, because it's all commercial, it's all urbanized, it's all mega supermarkets that control the market.
Thank you. And then the question about careers.
Can I try that?
Yes.
One set of policies that we need to is training, and our training institutions. So as a government that and a country that puts a high emphasis on agriculture and farming, why are our agricultural colleges in the state, you know, that they are? That is a shame. And what roles can universities and training, etc. So I would agree that, you know, the fourth industrial revolution tells us that a lot of the jobs that we have now in a few years because of technology advance would not exist anymore. So what does that say for employment in the country? What does that say for training? Are we ready with a workforce of 850,000 farm workers? Are we ready for what technology is gonna bring to us? In that aspect, so I would agree. Training is absolutely key.
I think I'm very happy with what issues of training and issues of identifying and making sure that those that are going into the industry are the ones that are right. I think that's the point that we need. Our focus should also be developing those centers where we need to bring in all these people who are interested, not force people. Because in this country, you are being forced or being given land that you don't even know where to start. So we need to come up with that plan of identifying people. In my farm, I've got about 4 or 5 graduates now that are working with me and my daughter. That's why I don't even go to my farm, because those guys are capable of doing everything that I can't even do, because they are scientifically trained to do all what they are doing. So it's true. In the next 10, 15 years to come, nobody's going to be in that tractor, because that tractor is technology. You need to put information for precision farming. So we are going that route. If we as emerging farmers can also give ourselves that opportunity to study, to be there, you're out.
Roelf, could I just make a comment on the perception of land as an economic resource? It was one of the things for the 5 years that I was in Mexico that was really quite striking, was how Mexican farmers, and in fact the government, see land. Government is not, you know, a farm is not simply land. A farm is something that in fact is an economic resource. It's a whole system. So you can own land, and you can live on land, and you can have some chickens, or you can grow some mealies. You are not a farmer. And there's a very different perception in that country to what it is to be a farmer versus the way in which I think generally we tend to regard farmers here. Farmers in South Africa do see it that way, but I don't think the society sees it quite in that way. And I think it's important that perception as to what a farm is, you know, the notion that you can buy land without buying what goes with the land is really setting people up for failure. So if there's a farm that has a huge amount of equipment on it that in fact is worth 3 or 4 times the value of the land, it's useless putting people onto land if you don't buy the equipment that goes with it.
But that I think goes along with the question about careers.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So people would see if there's a career in farming, then it adds a lot of value in terms of the meaning of what a farmer is and what farming means.
Can I come in on the careers question too? I think the so-called fixation on the farmers establishing that, because the topic here is family farming. But within industry, we are doing a lot of work through bursaries, through the Maize Trust and the Winter Cereals Trust, to identify within industry, not just within the farming sector, within industry, what we need in terms of research, what guys must go to agribusinesses, etc. So we're creating bursaries where there are deficiencies in terms of skills in the whole value chain. So that's the first one. The second one, within Agbiz, we have our congress next week. We have run a student case competition with the 16 top postgrad students in agriculture, more agricultural economics, using case study learning, telling them how does it work in agribusiness, so that they're also exposed to this, to show that there are careers outside of just farming in the whole value chain. We need those skills in the whole value chain. And the comment that Dan made is, yes, the 4th Industrial Revolution is going to cause certain jobs to be lost, but it's also going to create other new jobs in the process, that you need upskilled people with the right skills to use the new technology in the process. So the talent factor in the whole value chain is going to be critically important. And industry is working very specifically to address that. We're even working with government. DTI have now created a department, a sub-department called the 4th Industrial Revolution. What impact is that going to have on industry and on jobs, etc., in the process? So we're even working with industry, with government, on that whole dynamic as to how it's going to change. And then just to your question, just in terms of the processing and the export, because you had asked it both ways. Yes, at farm level you can both process, even at small scale you can process and export. The problem with exports though is when you get an order from China or from wherever, they want a container full, and that's the way trade works. And then you need size and scale to can do that. And next to you must actually speak to Lucian from PPECB, who's an absolute expert on this export situation. And he'll explain to you how the export situation works. So there you need to aggregate. And some big family farms are exporting, but then you need scale. But the smaller guys need to aggregate to really crack it into the high value export markets.
Can I add something here about coming from a university background? There's a big gap between university training and farming. And that's the problem. We should have an apprenticeship system. While I was in the university, we tried to connect students coming from townships, which haven't been on a commercial farm in their lives. We took them there and their eyes were just picture. They told me, but this is a business. And we need to establish that as well to make the new generation successful. And there's a huge gap in our university training linking to actual commercial farming.
But Johan, what about the absence of training institutions, the so-called agricultural colleges?
Yes, that were a very good example of very practical hands-on apprenticeship type of training. But even at university level, there's no use training a scientist which don't have good links with farmers. And he wants a computer expert now in the next 10 years on his farm. He doesn't need something else. So I think industry needs to come together much more on that in a farming community and how we do our training.
I have to respond to the land question. It is expected of Agri-SA, of me, as the leader of Agri-SA, as the president, and of Pitso, and of John, to solve the wrong political decisions of yesteryear, and the decisions of this government that we will have small-scale farmers, etc. So we have a history. We have a whole range of family farms, from the ones that have evolved to where they are, to the very poor, to the people on communal. That is a fact. We have those people, we have poverty, so what can we do about it? How do we spend the public purse? That is the debate that we should be having. How do we spend the public purse there? And then my mind just goes to the video of Grain SA, of the lady in the Transkei, who is on communal land, who with Grain SA's help, for the first time in her life with technology and help and extension, has now produced in excess of 6 tons per hectare. So I cannot tell her that, you know, we're going to set people up for failure. I don't. That's what we're doing right now. We are setting people up for failure. But I cannot tell her that for the first time in her life, she's produced a surplus, which she can do something with. That is the landscape that our political decisions have left us with. So we have to deal with it, and we have to deal with it decisively. And that is why I argue the way that I do. We cannot wish it away. It is there. It is there for everybody to see. The structural problems of apartheid is there for everybody to see. How do we tackle them? How do we solve them? That is what is expected of us every single day. That takes up 90% of our time.
Before we go back to the audience, we have to.
I just want to.
John, can you respond to the question about the definition?
I just wanted to respond to that.
I will give you a chance.
Yes, from Marika. I think in South Africa, some of the really successful family farms have evolved into corporations, and one or two of them are sitting as Skuman Boerdery and the Toy Group, and you can mention them, the Van Sales from ZZ2, etc. Those essentially are not. I would not classify as family farms anymore. They corporations. They're so integrated in the value chain, right from input side right into the market side. So they're not really just a family farm. Although they originated, their origin is from a family farm. So I think one will have to draw some sort of distinction there. But they are critically important in our system in terms of food security and access to international markets, etc. They really show the way in terms of competitiveness and efficiency in the process. So we must use the strengths of the whole value chain and all sizes of farmers to grow our agriculture and our agro-food value chain. So they play a key role in that process. But I do not, in the definition, what we get from the FAO, basically, I would not read them into a family farm as such.
Peter?
I think I'll read something. Proportion of output consumed at home. That's first one. Proportion of output sold. Proportion, just sold. Proportion of hired labor input. So it's just a small thing of you doing something. You need to grow from there going forward. So that's basically what really smallholder farmer can be defined. Because you just can't be the same as what John has said with those 2-3 guys. So you have to start from somewhere. You have to manage that on your own. You have to have your own resource. You have to have either your piece of land hired or own. So just that particular small items that you need to do. But at the end of the day, It must give you an access and also make sure that you can even pay your laborers via the output.
Thank you. Let's go back to the audience. There are two hands. Any on the right-hand side?
My name is CP Creek. I just have two questions. The one is, with agriculture being mostly rural and very decentralized in the country, and your markets and processing very centralized, is the idea of agri-hubs or agri-parks where you have more decentralized supply and processing points, is that something to look at? Is that feasible? And then the next question is, what's the biggest challenge of family farms going from one generation to the next, and how can you solve that? Can you prevent that challenge from actually happening? Thanks.
So Inga Kotze, WWF. I'm just wondering, quite a bit of reference has been made to the dominance of the retail chain and the power of that retail chain, the sort of mega four. Are we doing enough to find alternatives and to collectively work at weakening the power of that dominance of market in terms of the demand side for smallholders entering?
Morning, everyone. My name is Tracy Mahobobo, Bonsmara farmer from Ventersberg. The discussions were quite interesting. I think this question will be posed to Dan from Agri-SA. Dan, you have highlighted 3 items in the entire conversation where you were basing it on property rights, financing, and post-settlement. I just wanted to find out from your side, have you ever thought of putting it, the same, those 3 items, have you ever thought of doing it the other way around? Because now we have a lot of farmers who are emerging with small scale, and they are a huge number, and they are really struggling with post-settlement support. And I see it is quite not a priority as you have posted as Grain SA. So that's one thing that I wanted to find out from you. If you do it the other way around, how would you solve it? Because now you have property rights at first, and we as emerging farmers, mostly we're struggling with financing post-settlement support. And the second one is, if the motion for property rights is successful, how will you as Grain SA propose strategies to address it in such a way that it's not hampering food security? Are there any strategies that you have in place in case if it goes the other way around that will work for both small scale and also commercial farmers? Thank you.
Thank you. Before we go this way, I would like to put a challenge to the audience. Some of you are in fact family farmers, family businesses in farming. And it might be good if you would be prepared to share with us your experience. I think it would be informative for us who are sitting here, but in general for new farmers who come to the space of potential future family farmers, so that we are aware of those challenges. So I'm going to put that question in the next round, but let's return here to the questions. Okay. Dan.
The only reason, good to speak to a cattle farmer. We're clever people, we cattle farmers. The only reason I argued it that way, because for me it's a logical sequence. It starts, we had a dispensation where some people in the country enjoyed property rights and others haven't, and they still don't. So my argument would be to give emerging farmers property rights. The land that has been bought by government should be transferred, and property rights should be given full title. So that's my argument. And then the sequence that I argue it is then you unlock finance, like white commercial farmers can do. Somebody that has title on his land can access finance, and there are finance models and subsidized finance models that we're working on. So to answer your question, yes, we're doing a great deal of post-settlement support. That's what the whole Agri-SA transformation report was about. 331 million rand being spent by commodities in training, support, mentoring, all that kind of stuff. So we are doing it, and we, if you don't mind me saying it, we're doing it pretty damn good. And that's why I say we need the government to trust us. they need to trust us because we know agriculture and we can implement, and we know how to look after emerging farmers. So if you understand my sequence, how I argue it, we are actually doing post-settlement support, and we want to partner with government, and we want to do it better and have a public-private partnership regarding that. Regarding your question about the motion, I'm going to defend the Constitution come hell or high water. I believe in property rights. I believe in our civil liberties. I cannot see that the same generation in the ANC who has fought for the liberation of this country would now sacrifice our civil liberties and go back on that. We have come too far. If I speak to my fellow farmers in Afasa, they want property rights. Why should we sacrifice that? So I'm going to defend the Constitution, and I believe that sanity will prevail and the voice of reason will prevail, and that moderate people in South Africa will deal with our own problems and we will solve it.
Thank you. Dan, can we go to the other questions?
Yeah,
John?
I'd like to take the question on the markets and specifically also agri-parks. I think it's a very important issue, is the issue of market access, especially for the developing sector, because it's a very relevant one. I think we are making progress there, but we're not where we should be. I think the agri-businesses play a huge role in creating that market access, and they have committed to taking produce where they can, wherever they can, to take produce. But that doesn't cover all the commodities and all the places everywhere. I think, Lucian, if I can quote you, I think from PPECB, if you see the percentage of exports of fruit already going out, it's roughly 10% is already from small-scale emerging farmers. Now that's fantastic news for me. So they already accessing the international high-value markets, but that needs to escalate in the process. So I think there are models that are being developed. Companies like Sundays River Citrus, where they have a lot of small grower citrus farmers that can aggregate into that company for exports. They export 17-18% of South Africa's citrus. There are various models through Westphalia, the avocados that we and they do 50% of South Africa's exports. So there's a lot of models that are working, but we need to roll these out. I think the big one that's really starting now is beef. Is where your big feedlot guys like the Beef Masters and Cernic and so on are cracking the export markets in terms of beef, but they both have models in which they aggregating from small black farmers around weaners and models that they're developing, getting them into the market, and that's market access. So the models are really developing for a whole lot of commodities, but it can still be improved. Agri-parks that the government came with, the way they structured it, and the minister put me on that advisory council, and I kept on asking where the business plans for these, because it's got to make business sense too, and we never even got one single business plan. That was a top-down thing that was not structured from a bottoms-up demand, unfortunately.
It's where all the money's going.
And unfortunately, that's the money that was supposed to go to land reform went into the agri-parks. Yeah. Now, agri-parks as a concept is not wrong. From Italy, which has one of the most sophisticated agri-food systems in the world, to many poorer countries, agri-parks is the right concept. South Africa has agri-parks. Towns like Lichtenburg, Bethlehem to a certain degree, and many of your big rural towns are agri-parks. That's where where you get your inputs, and that's where you go and deliver your grain or your produce, etc. We went the wrong way with agri-parks. It was a top-down instead of a bottoms-up driven issue, and it was a committee of 30, with only 2 people from private sector on that advisory council. It was for the wrong reasons. It was wrongly structured. And I said that to the minister. Unfortunately, I honestly believe it's money wasted, because they put up structures and not looked where the production is. Market access is so important, but we must structure it properly with private sector to understand how we add value where that produce is taking place. Just on that issue.
Our time, unfortunately, has run out. I didn't realize it went so fast. Can I give a last 1 minute to each of you as panelists in conclusion? Dan, would you like to start?
Yeah, I think I've said what I wanted to say on many issues. Maybe one last thought which we haven't touched upon. You know, the big family farms, the mega farmers are many times demonized as being, they are demonized. And they actually have the capacity, if you just look at what somebody like Nick Serfontein of Sarnik Bonsmara is doing, ZZ2, everybody, they've got the capacity to establish new small family farm businesses. So I don't want to go into that. That's another. They have the capacity. They are doing it. They are willing to do it. So it's a whole value chain approach. And if we all, it is our inability to cooperate that is keeping us from achieving success. I honestly believe that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think there's a great future for family farming in South Africa, right from the small scale right to the big guy. Certainly we need support structures for the smaller guys around finance, around market access, a whole number of issues. Property rights, I fully support the issue on property rights. So there's a good future. We must look at the positives. There is so much positives to leverage to great for success in this country. We often get stuck in our own negative thinking, and if we position ourselves properly, get the right cooperation with the right structures, we can certainly add great value to this country. So I remain very positive.
Pizza, 1 minute.
Yeah, I think on our side, we need to see ourselves being active in taking this country forward. We need not to go out and talk about whatever that we're talking, which is negative, as we have said, but make sure that, you know what, we build from issues that we have going forward.
Just to come to CP as well, I think family farming is the second and third generation, which is where you really create capital and growth. How to manage that in terms of succession? What is the strong? How you do that life, and if he dies, then all the debt is covered. That's.
I mean, for me, the cheapest way to create jobs in South Africa is in agriculture. It's proven over and over again. It's the place to go. Give everybody a different view of where we're going. And the fighting about land will stop, without doubt.
Thank you very much to our panel, and thank you to the audience. It was a lovely discussion.